Hello, this is Fractal Weapons. I'm your host, Arkeem Ra, and today we have for the first time Eve Howard. And today we are going to be talking about how the Indigenous community in the United States and Canada as well is connected to MK Ultra, secret space programs, that type of stuff. So I think it's a huge part of the story that's not being talked about, and it's a huge honor to have you on the show to present this information. Thanks for coming on, Eve.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Hakeem, really.
So as a Indigenous person in the United States, I'm sure you know the reason why you're awake to this is because you've had hands-on experiences with this. You're involved yourself, so maybe you can just start with your story and how you woke up and how you realized the things that you realize now.
Well, I guess I kind of go back to the way life is on the reservation and living there. There are so many things that we're privy to, information that we are given from our elders, that we don't pass that information along. Everything is kept pretty much inside. You don't go to counseling, you don't talk to anybody, psychotherapist, therapy at any type. And a lot of people are suffering from severe PTSD. And I was one of them at one point, where I was, using substances, drinking, and alcohol. I'm a big advocate for not drinking, just because of all the information that was given to me by my medicine man, where he said, the reason why they will never have another prohibition is that they realize that the alcohol is able to extract you from who you are, your essence, your right from your wrongs, and it separates that, so that your spirit actually will be kicked out of your body and remain about, he said, anywhere between 3 and 4 days outside of your body, leaving you very open to any type of attachment, entity-wise, demonic or dark. So I have been sober. It'll be 7 years in this October that I stopped using alcohol or any type of substance.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I realized what a lonely existence it is to, when you use. I would become, I'd be more open to mega programming, where I would, and I've had a lot of people come to me with stories of things that they don't understand, that are in the program, that it's not resonating with them of what's happening because they did these things.
They don't have the context to be able to understand the feelings they're having, some of the strange memories that are coming back, that they have no idea how to understand that they're memories. They don't even know what they are. And I think, talking about the PTSD aspect and the fact that it kind of creates broken people is an important thing to bring up, because I think that the public, like normal people, their idea of what a quote unquote super soldier would be, which I don't think is an entirely accurate term for what we are. We're assets. We're used in many different ways, as well as the military fashion. But I just think that there's this sort of public perception that we would be very eloquent, very high intelligent, and have our abilities and be, hulked out and buff in the here and now. And the reality is none of this would work if that was true. We're shut off. Basically, it's kind of like you have abilities, you have gifts that in your original, if they didn't mess with you, maybe you could have used that in a way where you could help people, or you could use it for your own purposes, your own wishes. But instead, they take those abilities from you, use them for their own purposes, and in your normal life that you have to yourself, where you're quote unquote free, you don't have those abilities, you don't have those higher functions. So and an example, the fact that there are quite a few people experiencing PTSD and stuff like this on the reservation. I mean, it speaks volumes about the fact that, I mean, it seems like you're really onto something there, because it is a huge problem that affects many people.
Mm-hmm. And I grew up with, actually grew up moving around to several different reservations because my father worked for the government, which is a branch of they call the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So he worked with the government for probably about 30 years. So I grew up a lot on different reservations all over the Midwest, and moved to Arizona too as well. But the one thing that I have memories of being up in a closed reservation in Minnesota and leaving my uncle's house and walking along the lake. I was around 3, and I happened to come upon a tall gray, and was standing there, and my sister is off looking for me, and she finally finds me. I'm standing there. I'm looking at this creature, and he's looking at me. And she comes up and she grabs me, and she telepathically tells him, "You can't have her. This, leave her alone." And it runs away. That was the story that I was told, and I remember that day very clearly. We were looking at baby pigs that my uncle had, and I wandered off. I was like, somebody was calling me, so I was following the voice. And I remember walking along the lake. I remember seeing like the reeds, and they were bent over and empty, hollow. The seashells were so tiny, just perfect, like a baby's fingernail. They were so little. And there was this kind of a sandbar where you had to walk up over the sandbar, and then you walked, and there was the lake. And I remember it distinctly, standing there looking out. And then my sister, I could hear her calling me. And I looked over, and I didn't see her, but I could hear her. And I looked back at what I'm looking at, but it's almost like it was digitally erased, that whole memory. And the only person who remembered it was my sister. And I spoke with her last summer about it. And I said, our mother always told me the story and the picture that she drew of whatever it was that I was speaking to. I was sick, but I need to hear from you what really happened. So, yeah, she told me exactly what happened, and I believe at that point that that was the beginning of my labs, when I was taken from there and brought to, my mother was going to school in Stout, Wisconsin, so Menominee Stout University. And I believe she was like, "You remember that building there? You went to preschool there. I remember being in my crib. I remember the dog that we had when I was a little baby. I remember where I lived. I remember the apartment. I remember my sister was epileptic. I couldn't for the life of me remember that building or anything or anybody from that building. She was giving me names, Mrs. So-and-so. I don't know. I just could not remember, but I have a photographic memory, but I just cannot remember that building and what they did there. But there were psychology students that came in and worked with the kids. I do believe that was like the beginnings of my labs and finding out and the testing that they were doing there on the children.
I've heard stories from other, an Indigenous friend of mine who had what almost sounds like memories recall, but they're still kind of working through it and trying to figure out what it is. But they described being in situations that sounded like SSP type scenarios where it was like all Native people around them, like it was all Indigenous people. So I just feel like it's really important to talk about, because it's a huge, I really want people to understand that it affects more than just a certain group of people. It affects all different types of people, and also it's a huge part of why there was a genocide here in the United States, and why there were boarding schools, and why they're finding graves at the boarding schools and stuff like that. This all, the programs, the MK Ultra, the mind control, it all has to do with what, in my opinion, what the Native Americans endured. What's your opinion on that?
Oh, I agree with you 100%. I've been trying to come up with proof for a very long time. A lot of these schools, a lot of children went missing. And I'm not saying that all of them were put into these programs and sent away to either a breakaway civilization or put into actual active duty, but some of them were used for food. And were never seen from again, or used as sport. It depend on, a lot of it depend on their bloodline, and a lot of it depend on their abilities. But I know one thing: my father was used in the program, and he had a mother that was a stay-at-home mom, and the one thing that he would tell me, he said, I watched my mother die. She was killed in front of him, and henceforth that traumatic incident pushed forward all of the abilities that he had. He was taken along with his siblings and sent to a boarding school in South Dakota, where he was subjected to a lot more trauma and abuse.
And for me, it's just like, I can't believe for a second that this wasn't all just hardcore mind control programming. That's what it was. Like, it was like, we can't skirt the issue here. Like, we had a people who lived on this land and took care of it for longer than we can even imagine. And a group of people systematically erased their culture, their ways, their memories, their history, what they knew and what they were. And I think it's just so important to talk about that, and how that this is connected. It's all connected.
It's all connected, and it goes back a lot farther. I know I was going to work in conjunction with another gentleman that has a YouTube channel. We were going to talk about how he really feels like the technology that we had in the past, it super exceeds what we have right now in the present day. Even whatever they're keeping from us is about on par from what we had, and that was all taken. And we were all, the exact same thing taken from our elders.
And I can tell you from my perspective as somebody who worked at Montauk that had to do with the programs. Like, there was time travel involved in that. Like, a lot of our missions were retrieving indigenous technology, like, and basically erasing history. Like, because we didn't just, like, alter things and change things in a sense where we went back and totally altered it. We also made sure that people didn't remember things. And that's something that I don't think enough people understand. Like the narrative, the Western European, like, Christian narrative is that we came here and the Native Americans were, like, primitive and they didn't have technology, and that basically by colonizing this land, we did all the Native Americans a favor by bringing them up to speed and making them civilized. And that's part of the reason why we're sitting down and talking right now, is that's not true. That's not what happened.
That is utter and total BS. I know for a fact that a lot of the technology and even what we call ourselves, the government calls us Chippewa. We don't call ourselves that. We call ourselves Ojibwe. And if we really want to we call ourselves Anishinaabe. And I had it translated. My medicine man translated it for me. He said, it means light lowered from the stars. We were not here. This is not where we were born from this, we came from somewhere else totally, and bringing with it technology, the healing, and even, I think I sent you some pictures yesterday, and those are actual ceremonial. They use them when we have like ceremonial dances, and they're called powwows, and they use these staffs, but these staffs are used off planet as weapons, and even it's almost like a hoop, and it's like a circular, and I've seen those used as weapons off planet as well. And that's the technology that was brought here, but it was taken, and then they were told, well, you lived in these mud huts and these teepees, and they never did. They lived in cities. They had electricity. They had running water. They had everything.
There's actually a video that is very good, and forgive me for not remembering the exact city, but this is ironic. It's Tom Green goes to the city in Arizona, and it's an old ancient city that's like hundreds of years old. And there are structures there. They didn't erase it. They didn't go in there and destroy it all because it was in the middle of the desert. So maybe they thought they didn't need to. I don't know, but it's still there. And it's not. From my understanding, it's not. It wasn't Europeans that built it. It was indigenous people that built it. And yeah, you should look into that. It's a really interesting video. I wish I remember the name of the place. But there is evidence of that still, obviously, like that there's still remnants that they didn't quite get rid of. And yeah, when we came here, a lot of these buildings were standing, and there's a lot of evidence. And I'm not, I'm not going to claim one way or the other, but I'm going to say that it seems to, sus, like it seems like it could be true. There's a lot of people who say that some of these buildings, like government buildings and stuff like that, that are on grid lines and stuff like that, that they were already here when we came here, and we didn't build them, we just occupied them. And so yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. Well, a lot of the Tartaria people talk about this stuff, but they kind of miss the point, I think. And like think the Earth is flat and stuff like that. But if you do look into Tartaria, you'll find kind of evidence of what you're talking about, where the Native Americans here had all sorts of advanced technology and stuff like that, and they weren't living like this primitive way that they try to tell you. And not only that, but like when like Africa got decimated by Western Europeans and stuff like that, it's the same. They try to present the same idea that, well, even though we did all these terrible things, now parts of Africa are more civilized or whatever. And it's just not true. It's not true. It's not true at all.
It's lies. It's lies, and people need to know the truth.
They go in and destabilize these places, destabilize the Native American community, for example, and also countries and stuff like that. They go in and destabilize them, fuck them up, and then they go, hey, look, these people, if we go in here and change things, we'll be doing them a favor. And it's like, wait a minute, they were fine before you went in and messed with them. You know what I mean? And that's something that is important. People need to understand it. It's part of the psyop. You know what I mean? It's part of the mind control.
And funny you should say that, because I know I talk with my medicine man a lot, but he's the one connection that I have to the people, because I can't really speak to a lot of these people, but yet these people come to him with these dreams or these memories, and they're not sure if they're real or if there's something that's going to happen in the future, but they all basically are the same kind of memory. And he said it rings a lot into what you were telling me. And one of the memories that I've had that was reoccurring as a kid was that I was by myself, and I'm like in army gear, and I'm like leading these people, and they're women, they're children, there are elderly people. There's no military age men, except for there's little kids, these little boys, and older men. And I'm leading them through these alleys and these back streets and backyards and through houses, and we're waiting. And you can hear gunfire. I hear like things exploding, and large machinery moving and men yelling, and I'm leading him through, and we finally get to where we're going, and it's like this huge, looks like a hotel of some sort, and it's always the same building, and I lead him in there, and there's rooms, and there's water, and there's food, and there's clothing, and there's, they get to actually rest and not be scared, and I feel like I'm doing this wonderful thing. Well, I found out approximately a couple of years ago that where I was leading him to, the same place, someone pulled up this book and showed me, and it's called Villa Schulster. Now, Villa Schulster's been whitewashed from the internet and from history books, but it was the very, very beginnings of MK Ultra, pre-World War II. And then now it's just like this empty building that has some historical value, but it's, it's completely not what it was. But I've actually had someone show me the pictures, and I just broke down crying because it was
Where is it located?
It is located in Europe. I do believe it is in Austria.
Okay.
100% certain. I lost a lot of material on one of my tablets that I had, including a lot of stuff for reports and scientific reports and everything. So I wish I had the exact spot. I'm just going by my claircognizance at this point that it was in Austria, the very beginnings of it, but they were brought there. There were underground facilities underneath, and they were able to verify that too, that there were these go deep underneath the building, and there were these rooms, and there were rooms that had no light source, and that had locked doors on the outside, not the inside, the outside. So yeah, I had to make peace with a lot of memories that I had that weren't always good, and we're not always the good guys, and we're certainly have to realize that, with it comes a lot of manipulation and lies and control and implants and everything else.
What you have experienced there with that memory of guiding those people to safety and then realizing it was quite the opposite is very common. When people have a memory, they have a memory and it's fuzzy and it's warm and they think they're doing this good thing. And then they delve just a little bit deeper into the memory and they realize that, like, for example, I had a memory where I was rescuing slaves was the memory. And this was like a shared memory with me and a few other people in the community. And we had to sit and go through these memories. And I can speak for myself when I say that we weren't operating a rescuing operation. We're actually working on a ship where we were trafficking slaves. And, we weren't happy about it. We were there against our will and basically slaves ourselves. And one of the things that they would do if you didn't behave on the ship is they would sell you off into slavery, literally, like worse slavery. Like they'd pick the worst thing and send somebody off if they disobeyed, to make an example. So it's all slavery on different degrees and different levels. There's lower people on the ladder, and then when you're high on the ladder, you feel like you're important and you don't feel like you're a slave. You don't feel like you're put in this position as a mind-controlled servant, but you are, you know what I mean? Whether you're the lowest rung of the ladder and you're just like a janitor or something like that, or you're a military general, they've got you controlled and doing things that are against your will. I mean, the mind control aspect of this is extremely important. It violates people's sovereignty and their consent, and that's not okay. And that's one of the reasons why I think we're all public, is because we're kind of trying to highlight that. I'm sorry if I went on a bit of a tangent there, but yeah.
Okay. No, I remember as early as age 8 going on missions in the astral. We were sent into this warehouse, and we were told not to bring our weapons because the people that we were to retrieve out of the building, and they were terrorists, did not have any weapons. And so for good faith, we were just going to leave ours behind and walk in. And our commanding officer sends us in, and I get all the way to the back of this warehouse, and it's like a Costco type building. And there's like these big shelves and stuff with all these things on it. And I get to the very back of the store, And I turn, and there's a man standing there, and he's got an automatic weapon. And all of a sudden, I am immediately hear on the radio, retreat, aboard. They have weapons, and we run. I'm like running down, and I can see straight in front of me where the doors of the warehouse are, and it's light out, and I can see the parking lot, and I'm booking it as fast as I can, and I hear gunfire. And all of a sudden, I can't run, and I hit the ground, and there's this extreme pain in my back. And I realize I've been shot, and I'm laying there, and I can feel somebody come down by me and like grab me and pull me. And then all of a sudden I wake up, and I'm in my room. I know I was not as old as 9, because my parents were still together, and they got divorced when I was 10. So I remember just laying there in complete pain for probably about a good 4 to 5 minutes before it would finally ebbed away. But I know the pain of being shot, and I've never been shot before. But I ended up having 4 surgeries.
You said this was in the astral?
This was in the astral. I was doing missions. They would come and get me in my sleep. My mother would say
Can you go into that a bit deeper? Because I don't understand that concept. Can you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, I have this. I've always had this really weird thing when I was a kid, where I would go to bed, and I could lay there, and I think it had some conjunction to do with this nightlight that my mother would put in my room, but it would shine up on the wall, and I could sit there and stare at it to the point where I would go into this weird trance, and I would be going. It was almost like a virtual classroom, where I was like learning like things. They would show me geometric shapes. They would show me like different types of formulas, math problems, things like that, history.
But this was like in another density, like this wasn't.
This was like I was still aware that I was still in my room, but I could be somewhere else at the same time. And then
you were by, what is that? They call that being by. It's on the tip of my tongue. By
don't ask me.
When you're in two places at once. But do you think that you were physically? Those are like physical, real events, or?
Yes. I ended up having 4 surgeries in that area where I was shot. And very recently I took some pictures. I should have sent those to you too, but it's really weird. There's like these scars on the side of the surgery. Scar goes up and down right on my spine. And that's exactly where I was shot. Where I was shot was L4, L5 area. And that's exactly, I had a spinal fusement after the 4th surgery. They couldn't stop whatever was causing growths and spurs and all this stuff.
What was the explanation?
Where would all the spurs come from?
What the doctors were just saying? It was like growth spurs or something?
Yeah, and I'm being treated now. Everything I do is all natural, but I go to a chiropractor, and my x-rays were showing that I have military whiplash, which I never served in the military.
Well, yeah, you did though at the same time.
I did. I know I did. It's really weird. I come from a military family too.
Yeah, so with the boarding schools and everything else, they were targeting talented and gifted. That's in the same way. They like, it was like you said, they realized that, wait, we can take advantage of this situation. And they're funneling these kids into the programs. And man, it was really rough hearing you say how a lot of these kids gotten just eaten. Because I know what you're talking about. It happened at Montauk too. There was a feeding room, and you kept a lot of these reptilian species. You can keep them happy if you feed them people, especially if you're a person. They really get off on that, like the fact that you will feed your own people to them. They look at it as a control thing, but it's really sad. And I don't know. I just think maybe you could go in a little more about just your dad's military background and being moved around and what you saw on the different reservations as far as like, you know, mind control programming and secret space program stuff.
So like my dad, my grandmother on my father's side, his mom was killed by a drunk driver, and he witnessed her. She was also 7 months pregnant, so he witnessed her lying there dead and from being crushed between two vehicles, and the baby also died. And he was sent to the boarding school with his siblings. He had all sisters and one brother. And they went, he was there for a long time, and then he ended up being sent home because his sister had graduated and was having trouble with the little ones, the ones that were not sent to this school. I think the kids got separated at some point. So my dad stayed home and was like getting a job and was taking care of them. They moved to Minneapolis so they could be closer to the father, who was, you know, not part of the picture very often, would just show up randomly, you know, but he was working far away and was a heavy drinker. So my dad kind of took over as working and was kind of involved with some friends, and they would get in trouble. You know, they would party, or they would go drinking, or they would, you know, knock over a convenience store, just little tiny things, you know, that were getting them that could segue into something a lot bigger. Well, the police were starting to harass them. If anything went wrong, they would knock on the doors, drag them out, question them, take pictures, send them home. And it was starting to get to them. So they said, well, you know what, let's join the Army. At this point, my father was 17, had no diploma from high school. And him and another, out of the 6 people, he said only 2 were taken, had passed all the tests, and my father was one of them. I learned through somebody who has access to some of the records that my father was used in these programs, and he was a tracker. He would track people. He tracked people like Hitler. He tracked people that were like during the Cuban missile crisis. He was tracking people there. He was reptilian. He had a very keen sense of smell. And he just worked with all these programs and was sent back and forth and all the time, because he was born in 1939. So technically, if he went in when he was 17, it was 1956 when he was in the Army.
Okay, do you think he was involved in like time travel stuff too?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll say one thing. I know I have no way to prove it, but a lot of the people that are in these programs that do all these, that go forward and then they get sent back, and then they're everything, you know, all the time is rewound on them, and they're placed at the time that they're taking. For some reason, it acts kind of funny with a lot of their cells, so they don't age the same way that everybody else does. My father, he died when he was 83 years old, and he looked like he was about 62 at the oldest. So
Yeah.
he didn't have hardly any gray hair. I have pictures of him probably about 6 months before he passed away, and he looks very young. And you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that, you know, I feel like I've been used in these programs since a very small child, and I still get a lot of people that are like express a very surprise when they hear exactly how old I am. So I know.
What do you another good question I think to ask would be do you some of the knowledge that's retained still of what happened or what life was like before colonization, before, you know, they reset history. Do you know, could you maybe like talk about that a little bit? Like, because I feel like there's this thing where we listen to Native Americans talk about these stories. There's lots of, legends and stories. And people look at them really like, obviously, of course, there's some poetic, like metaphorical things happening sometimes in these stories, but also sometimes there's like very literal things in these stories where they're talking about, interaction with ETs or different entities, multidimensional entities and stuff like that. And I feel like it gets lost in translation. People think it's like all hypothetical or something like that. And I just kind of wondered like what your opinion is on that, and like how we get out of looking at our past and our history and like the stories of like, your people and stuff like that. And even the stories of, ancient European people too. Like, how do we separate the mythology and stuff like that from the reality of it? Because there's a reality there that's really important, right? Like, could you maybe talk about that a little bit? I'm sorry if that's a lot in one question, but I have a feeling you get what I'm saying.
I do. I realized that in a lot of ways that I was put in these programs and I was, segregated from a lot of other different races up until about the age of 15. And most of them stay on because there are these, and we can't prove it, but a majority of the people that live on the reservations will talk about these deep underground military bases that are on the reservation. And I've actually had that validated through another whistleblower on another show that he had done, where he said that they put him on the reservations because they realized how tight-lipped a lot of the indigenous population is, and that they don't want anything to do with it, and they're not going to bother them. They're not going to, they'll just keep it zip. And I think in my house, so I grew up on a reservation in the middle of Minnesota, and I lived on the lake, right by the lake. And there was a tower it was supposed to be like a radio tower, but there was no radio station there. So I don't understand why it was there. But there was like, you could look outside my bedroom window, and about a half a mile away, you could see this little tiny, I'm going to say it's like a little house type deal, like a shed, but it was surrounded by a fence, and the fence was, had barbed wire on the top, so it was meant to keep people out. And I do believe that was the entrance to the base that was underneath, that was accessible to a lot of the UFOs that would dive into the lakes, and a lot of people saw them. And a lot of people on the reservation don't say too much. We also have other types of species, should I say, that don't come from this planet, that live there. We know of them, they know of us. We don't say anything about their presence, and life goes on. And we don't have people sniffing around and taking samples and trying to capture them, or any of those strange reality shows where they're always hunting them.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous, right? Like, I understand how. So, yeah, I guess that kind of has to do with just like that culture of not talking about certain things. That definitely aids in their them being able to continue this, and without people realizing it. But I've looked into some of the ancient stories, that come from the indigenous people, and they talk about the serpent-headed ones a lot. They talk about the flying snakes and stuff like that. Do you know anything about that stuff?
Yes, in fact, a story comes to mind. There was quite a few medicine men that were gathered. It was during the sap running season, when the maple syrup comes down. We do a lot of ceremonies, and they gather the syrup. It has to keep boiling, usually boils for long periods of time. So these people were out in the woods, and it was a very heavy trees, so that there was like almost like a covering, like a canopy, and they spotted a man walking, and they're like quick to point out that he was smoking. Like every time he went underneath an area where the sun would shine on him, his skin would start to smoke. And they called, I forgot what they called him. There was a specific word for him, but basically it was almost like a kind of like a vampire. And there are really strange things. Probably shouldn't be talking about it, but at this point, I think I realized that there's a lot of damage done to my people just by not saying anything. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come out and speak my story. I'm hoping, because a lot of people do come to me or are sent to me through my medicine man that have all these memories and these things. And I remember there was this one young girl, I won't say her name, but she had severe omega programming, and she had tried to cut her arms, and something happened. She was in her room. She did this. The next thing she remembers is going into shock. And she recalls just before she blacks out, 2 people in white walk into her room. She thinks it's her roommate and her roommate's friend. But upon the next morning when she wakes up, she realizes that her arms are bandaged. There's no blood whatsoever. She's still wearing the same clothes that she went to sleep in.
The control team. They got control teams. They wear all white jumpsuits, and they're in the dumb. They're in the dumb underneath wherever you live.
Mm-hmm.
Where I live in Appleton has one too. So like, yeah, and they're like the control team. Like if certain events are going to happen, they'll make sure they don't. You know what I mean? That's what they're doing.
She showed me, and this had just happened a month prior to me seeing her arms. She looked like they had been healing 6 months at that point, and they should not have looked like that at all.
So they need her to stay alive for whatever reason. And there's a question that people have a lot of times, like, why do they let us stay alive and have like normal lives? And a lot of it has to do with continuing the time continuation, because we're supposed to have normal lives, but also it creates a save file for them to be able to access at any time. Like your consciousness has all these programs in it, and they can throw them in clones and make them do all this work, and it's just an unlimited source of labor, and they make a lot of money off of doing this stuff.
I was going through, and I have approximately around 60 plus altars that were taken during a soul separation down in a deep under military base. But I know one of the things that I've had dreams of like seeing like a lot of people that I've known on reservations, and they come to me almost like a meeting type thing, and they're high ups. I can tell that they're officers. So they, I really feel like the Indigenous have their own type of programming, or else they are programmed, or else they kind of do their own thing. But I think I'll give you just a really quick glimpse into the ability of these strange things that I can do, that I've been doing probably since about 2000. Things that I have no explanation for. Things I was in Arizona. Okay, I'll give you an explanation. I was in Arizona from 96 to 97. I lived in Phoenix. I had no memory whatsoever of the Phoenix Light incident that happened on March 13th of 1997, March 13th, I believe, 14th. In fact, I didn't have any memory of that till 8 years later when 8 years ago. So 8 years ago, I remembered, hey, I lived there during that time. And in which time my mother looks at me and says, you don't remember? It was all over the news. People talked about it everywhere. I had no memory of it. It was completely wiped from my mind. But I realized exactly what it was and what it was what project it was, and that I was used during that night because I had a block of missing time and some really strange screen memory that it makes me laugh to this day. So
what was the screen memory? Just for
it was a man that came to me, and he was Mayan or something. He was a tribe that had disappeared from the face of the earth, and he had come to me. It was completely outrageous, some of the things that they put in my head. But yeah, I was the best way for you to decipher what is real and what's a screen memory is if you don't recall it till after the fact. Like something happens. I had a traumatic brain injury where I fell from a balcony. But when I woke up, the weird thing is when I got up off the ground, the first thing was I thought I was taken and just returned in that condition. And I had amnesia for about a week before I was fully allowed to have this screen memory come in, and this is what happened. And it was like, okay, because that sounds like something I totally do. So yeah, I don't understand the reasoning for any of the things that they do and how they can call themselves professionals at any point in time.
Yeah, that was kind of a big mistake, having the entire city of Phoenix see that. There's been a lot of people that said it's blue beam, said it's not real. They're testing blue beam.
Yeah, it was a 3D. It was a holographic. They were testing their holographic technology, and they wanted to see how real it really was, and how many people they could get to believe it.
What's interesting about that Phoenix Light situation, some personal background into my life is I have an aunt who is related to me through my uncle, who is, so she's like a step aunt or whatever, not biological. But her brother was the one who filmed the most clear video of that because he lived on the probably the most elevated region or like area of Phoenix. He lived like kind of like on a cliff almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had governments from all over the world paying him for copies of the footage, interviewing him. So, whatever occurred there was like real. And the governor, or not the governor, maybe it was the governor of Arizona. It might have been the mayor of Phoenix. I can't remember which one, but he apologized for how he handled that situation later because he tried to make kind of a joke of it.
Yeah.
In more recent years, he apologized for how he handled it, and he kind of explained like, yeah, that was real. I was freaked out. I didn't know how to handle it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, so, and it's one of those other things too, where it's like, man, it really makes me laugh when people say there's no evidence. It's like, don't you remember the time that a spaceship, which whether it was a hologram or not, still flew over Phoenix? Or what about the time that a bunch of flying saucers just showed up to the White House? They tried to say it was like cloud formations or something. Like, dude, there's literal pictures of spaceships floating outside of the White House. And that was when the Nazis came and kind of laid their dick on her face and like, hey, we're still here. You know what I mean? Like, or whatever. Like, but I hate to use such rudimentary language there, but I don't know how else to say it. It was a power move on their part. It was them, and I think they forced us to sign a contract or something like that in order for us to keep our autonomy as a nation and stuff like that. We had to make a deal with them. But sorry if I'm getting a little sidetracked there. But
no. Actually, now some of the things, the very traditional ways, I've had some people come to me because they've had some very strange occurrences happen. My ex, his sister is a female medicine man, and she wanted to ask me a question because something was bothering her. Like, she was just there with her husband. They were bringing stuff into the car, and he had been complaining that his elbow was bothering him. And so she's like watching him, and she like kind of does this little, looks over, reaches over, grabs his elbow as he's bending there, grabs it, pulls it, and goes like this. And when she went like that, whatever was in her hand hit the ground, and it was black, and it was very ooey gooey type thing, and it almost seemed to like move and
black goo?
change shape. Yes. But they had never seen that before on the reservation. They didn't understand what it was. So I was able to go, I had to go in there and like talk to her and tell her what it was, because a lot of people were really freaked out. But yeah, it's definitely making its way, and a lot of the traditional healers are having to discover a lot of these new things that are going on.
This is something that I'm really afraid of. It's like there's this sort of invasion of the body snatchers kind of thing that can happen with the black goo, where it can start taking over and you don't even realize it's happening. And that's the first time that I've ever heard anything like that, because I've always thought that in the here and now they're probably not going to have you filled up with black goo. But I mean, then again, when Max Spears passed away, he was coughing up black goo. So I guess some of us literally do have the black goo in us, even in our biological here and now bodies, because they're using our original bodies and just regenning them. You know what I mean? Regenerating our cells and putting us back to where we were when they took us, and then wiping our memory, you know? But that is incredible. I mean, yeah, you're really just, I can't thank you enough for presenting this information. I know that, like you said, you sort of didn't feel like you feel kind of, there's a taboo around it, right? Talking about it. There's a taboo around really talking about the truth. And I think that is a lot of just like, it's the programming. Because it's always been that way. Like if you see something weird or you have some sort of strange experience, you don't talk about it. For instance, when I was a child and I knew I was getting abducted, I knew I was getting taken, my mom believed me. She knew that something must be happening to me because I wouldn't just be freaking out, right? But she just told me, like, don't talk about this. Be careful when you talk about this. And that's it's just a thing in society in general where people are afraid to talk about things that they can't explain because that means you're crazy, right? So, and it's only until recently where we're getting enough context to where it's like, oh, that's what that is, right? Like that black goo, for instance. If you weren't around, they would have had no, all they could do is just
no idea
guess.
what it was
whatsoever.
Right. They probably would have thought it was like another creature or some sort of, they could have even been more backwards in thinking that it was bad medicine being used on them, from somebody else that wished to do them harm. I know there was a reservation that was up by Duluth, Minnesota, and this young man just happened to come upon, they had a party there the night before. Everybody was still kind of waking up, still kind of hungover. He shows up and he's like, hey, he's like, I'm looking, does anybody have any money? He's like, I found this iPad in the woods, and they're like, it's not an iPad. It's just like one of those $30 jobbies from Walmart, one of those, the pads it looks so generic. It has like a black plastic back on the sides, and then the screen. Yeah. But the one thing is that they couldn't find any way to turn it on. So they're like looking all over. There was like not even a camera little dealy on it, but it looks just like a tablet. So my ex is like digging around with it. They go and they find a really thin metal, and they pop the back open. And when they pop it open, they realize that inside of it was all biological. They said it looked like actual working neurons. There was a synapsis, there was activity, there was, they couldn't understand it. And he was like, well, I don't know, how do you turn it on? Well, how do you turn it on? We all know, we've worked with the technology before. You use it, with your mind to turn it on, and they couldn't turn it on. So they ended up, the guy snapped it back together and was still intent on trying to find someone to buy it, you know, so he could get money for cigarettes or money for another bottle. And he just takes off, and he like walks out, and everybody's just like floored. Like, we opened a tablet that literally had organic material in it. Organic freaking material. It looked like an actual brain functioning. So yeah, they happened to find it out in the woods, close to this building that they thought that was one of the doorways to the deep underground military base that's there on the reservation. So somebody lost something they shouldn't have lost.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I also remember interacting with those just clear glass ones. They're just float in the air. You know what I'm talking about, where like it's floating in the air and you can literally just push it out of your way and then pull it back again, and it's just like,
and it was all that you could really tell that it was there was like some sort of like a weird catch of the light. It was like on a sliver of like a weird light. Yeah, I have memories of those. I remember that was
that's something that I've seen in like movies and stuff, and it's like, whoa, I've seen it depicted pretty accurately. One other thing that I think is really important in this conversation, and this is going to maybe bring a little bit of my personal story kind of to the interview here, is I believe that moving forward, if we really, there's a lot of trials and tribulations that need to be done, we need to go through before we can get to the point where we can have justice served, and maybe see some compensation for the individuals that were in these programs and like fixing them. But from what I've seen in other timelines and memories that I have, is one of the ways that we take down, when in the timelines where we take down the crown and we take down the cabal, and we kind of start restoring balance to the earth again and fixing things, like a positive timeline. I recall the native tribes of the United States basically being given their land back, or like they're given authority of the land. And from what I recall, it's the Native American community, the indigenous community, that is pretty much like 100% in charge of healing everyone. Like, obviously, like I actually, in one of the counselors, or excuse me, in one of the realities that I've seen, I become a DID integration therapist. So it's like not all just Native people, but they're the ones who are like the governmental force behind it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know how like now if we started some sort of, we're going to give these MK Ultra people money and for compensation for what happened to them, and then we're going to give them the mental health treatment that they need or whatever. Well, in the timelines where I've seen that that's happened, it's through the tribes, and the tribes are given like lots of money and resources to be able to do it, and also they're given resources for like all like DID facilities, but also just straight up just plain old regular drug and alcohol treatment facilities, and also like better schooling and stuff like that too, funding for schooling. I've seen that in other timelines, but I'm just curious, like, if we were to build this reality that I see in a not too distant future, like what steps do you think that we would have to take to where we could see a future where we can get justice for what happened to not just everybody in these programs, but especially the Native American communities, to get them their land back, get them and get us in a situation where we can be healing? Like, do you think that sounds pretty accurate to you? Like, right? Like, it wouldn't be the CIA or the mainstream doctors and stuff like that we have now that would be in charge of that. That wouldn't even make sense. The only people that would even be able to understand that are medicine men, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. So I don't know, like, do you like, can you imagine this future with me? Can you see it too? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. But the weird thing is that the the Native Americans were brought here to like heal this planet. A majority of them. And the weird thing is I think it was like 2 summers ago. So it was 21. It was June of 2021. It was a full moon. And I was visiting some friends of mine. One of them was a medicine man too. I grew up with him, and he was like my first husband's best friend. And I was visiting him in Arizona, and I just felt like there was something was about to happen, something really bad. Like they had been planning this, like with the timelines. And so what I did was I took like this water and I blessed it. I sat there. I was able to pull in all of these ancestors and these I guess people would call them angels, but I just call them light beings. And I was able to pull them in, and we were able to get this water completely blessed to the point where it was glowing. And then the instructions I was given was that I was to take it outside, and I was to pour it on the ground and offer up tobacco and pray. And I told my friend, I was like, okay, we're going to go outside. I go, but you can't bring your phone. And he's like, okay, but why? And I was like, just trust me, you can't. He said, all right. So he leaves his phone. I leave my phone. I take the water. We go outside, and I find an area where it's kind of like midway in the backyard, straight up. And I walk out there, and the first thing I noticed is that there's a couple of ships in the sky. And I thought it was kind of cool. But we keep walking out, and as I'm starting the ceremony, he's standing behind me, and he just exclaims, he goes, oh my God, are you seeing this? He goes, the whole ship is just filled with skies, with lights, with ships. They're just everywhere. They're all got their lights on, and they're there to witness this. I didn't understand it at the point, but I had to do this healing. So I pour this water in, and then we pray, both of us pray. And I offer up tobacco. You always offer something in exchange for a prayer for someone or something, or for the mother. Then you offer up tobacco, and that's the most sacred thing that you can offer. So I put down my tobacco. I gave some to my friend. He puts it down and stuff, and we're both praying. And all of a sudden, I didn't see it because my back was to the moon, but he was facing the moon, and he said it was like someone just turned the brightness up, like on a slide, just whoop, and it just got bright. And it was really weird. But the ships were there for a while, but then they started to slowly turn off their lights and leave. But yeah, it was one thing, because I knew they were going to be there. I knew I wasn't supposed to bring my phone, because it wasn't a TikTok moment. It was a moment that I was to share with so many other. They wanted to see what it was like to do the things that we can do, that we heal, and we're just healing Mother Earth. And I think I did it a couple of times. That summer was every full moon. I would go out and use this water to pour into the earth, and to bring healing to Mother, because she's pissed. She's pissed at everybody. Why is this being allowed to be done? Why are people not waking up to the truth and seeing what's being done, and how everyone's being manipulated, and it's harming, not only harming to us, but it's harming to her, because we're all one with each other and with this planet. And it's up to us to be able to heal it. And in doing so, we have to be able to accept the truth of what's really going on. And once we find out the truth, that is the moment when the healing starts. But we have to get these people out of here. We can no longer allow these individuals to run things, because they're doing horrible, unspeakable things. Because now, in this moment, everybody is understanding how the Native Americans felt when it came to genocide, when it came to smallpox, when it came to being snuffed out and not being treated as a human being. And that's the thing with all these Jabberwockies, that's exactly what's happening, is this targeting. It's targeted genocide, and it's for the people of this planet, not just Native Americans, not just this area over these people here. It's all of us. We're all being targeted.
From what I can see, in my experiences and my interactions with other worlds, we have a certain amount of freedom on the surface of Earth that's pretty rare. We have a lot of freedom here, despite the fact that we're controlled and that we sort of don't allow ourselves to have our own freedom, right? Like we take our own sovereignty away from ourselves. We allow that to happen. We have something special here. We have an opportunity where we could make things better. And I kind of think that we see that with, I think we're heading towards a positive place, because I personally see with like what happened with the pandemic. I know that's a really touchy subject and I don't want to get my channel struck down or anything like that, but what I'll say is, regardless of what people believe about it, there was a lot of really dystopian measures that they wanted to push through with that, and control us, and people stood up to it. Regardless, like I said, I know it's a touchy subject, but I think that the people of Earth said that our sovereignty was more important than our safety in that instance, and kind of stood up and said, enough is enough. Like, you know what I mean? Like we saw it with the trucker thing in Canada and stuff like that. And it's just one of those things where no matter how you feel about that, you can't allow the government to control people. You have to stand up to that. And I feel like, yeah, sometimes we falter. We're not doing perfect. Yeah, well, Earth has a lot of problems, but I feel like we're on a positive path. The thing that I think we really need to figure out now is the division they're causing between everybody with all these silly narratives and stuff like that, like trans people and gay people, and we're all, that we're different, and our differences, and highlighting that and making us hate each other for things that are of no consequence, while meanwhile this elite cult of Satanists, Luciferians, psychopaths, are doing the worst of the worst things to all of us. They're the enemy. You know what I mean? They're the ones who we should all be fighting against. And I just think that that's the ticket towards a success here, is realizing we have more in common than we believe, that we don't need to highlight our differences, and that we need to work together towards, healing the planet that we live on and living in prosperity. That's something that no matter who you are, no matter what you believe, that benefits you, benefits everybody, because this planet is an organism that we're living on. And if we take care of it, that there's no one that doesn't benefit. So, I just think it's really important that we start fighting the real enemy, which to me is, I know I'm going to piss a lot of people off here, but it's the church. It's the crown. It's the programming. It's the mind control programming. I mean, where does it really all start, right? Like that religion, I'm sorry, like most worldwide religions that were forced through genocide, that's how they're spread. They're mind control programming. And we need to stop. We need to start seeing what the real enemy is, and see that like these organizations are they're just covers for human trafficking and ritualistic sacrifice and just all these terrible things. Like, and once we realize that and stop being silly about it and stop arguing over bullshit, we have a good chance of toppling the whole thing over and creating a better future. I mean, it's just a matter of time and perseverance. And like I said, just the divide and conquer stuff. We have to stop buying into that. That's a really big problem right now.
You're exactly right. I mean, the one thing that people don't understand is that this is just like a suit, and that's all that it is. Like, I identify as energy, so when I meet people, I like look at their energy. I mean, so I don't know. I don't consider myself to be like I don't put myself in a grouping of a woman, of just, or this or that. There are so many things that we are, that it's so hard to sit down and say one thing.
And it's not a new concept. That's not a new concept. Like, I'm not trying to be polarizing here, but there's a lot of people in this truther movement, in this truther community, are trying to act like people identifying in certain ways or being trans or whatever is this new thing, and it's programming and it's mind control. And I'm seeing a lot of bigoted, hateful bullshit among people that I respect. And it's sad, because it's like, there is truth to that we aren't just man, woman. Like, gender is a spectrum. The masculine and feminine is in all things. It's in the Kabbalion. It's a universal aspect to the universe, and every single human being has male, masculine, and feminine aspects and different energies, and to just act like this polarizing binary viewpoint of sexuality and gender is the only thing. And if you deviate from that, you're falling into this Satanist agenda. I'm sorry, but I do not subscribe to that, and that's not what this channel preaches. Like, I don't believe that at all. And frankly, like, I didn't know how I was ever going to come out. Like, I wanted to make kind of a public statement on that on the channel, and I think I did it in an eloquent way. It's like, we have to be more accepting of the fact that we interpret the universe and things differently. Like, I even brought up, Christianity and how evil that can be and stuff earlier. That doesn't mean that I think that if you're a Christian, if you believe in Jesus, or if you're a Muslim and you believe in Allah and stuff like that, that you're automatically a part of the Luciferian aspect of that. But what I want everybody to understand, regardless of what religion that they're a part of, a Luciferian priest has to infiltrate a mainstream, quote unquote, good religion in order to be a Luciferian priest. That's a part of their cult. They have to go in and corrupt the word of God, as they put it. It's part of their job, and it's part of the mind control. They like to invert everything. They invert everything. So
it's a fear tactic. It's a control fear. If you don't listen to what this is written, the written word, you're going to hell. There is no such place as hell or as heaven. Where we go when we go is to another dimension, another life, another beginning. It's not the end. And it has never been, as a majority of us have been energy since the beginning of time. There is no end. It's all a fear. It's all a form of manipulation. It's all a form of control. It's easier to lower the vibration and to control the human being when they're able to give them a black and white world, where if you don't do it like this and you do it like that, then bad things are going to happen. That's all that it is. And I think once people are aware of that, but you know what, it's so heavily ingrained into like every single person, into their DNA, because, great grandmother was a nun, and then she met grandpa, and then she left, and she is this, and who cares? Yeah. We didn't grow up. I think that's one of the reasons why Native Americans are very targeted in these programs, is because the majority of us are not brought up like this. We are not brought up under the cloth. We are not brought up in any type of theological nick that you can put us in. It's spiritual. It's just, even Gitchimanadu, which is the term for the creator, but when you break it down and you translate it, it's the Great Spirit. And the Great Spirit is in everything all around us. And it's like right here. That's where the God is, right there within all of us.
I agree with your I agree with that idea. It's very similar to the idea of the all. It's the same thing. I just think that it needs to be paid attention, because what's weird about the quote unquote truther movement is a great deal of it is like conservative Christians. And I personally, like, I don't care who you are, if you're on board with stopping these programs and helping us and stuff like that, like, it doesn't matter to me. But at the same time, I find it interesting because it's like there's so much programming there, and these people think that they're awake and that they realize the truth, and that they're, warriors for God and patriots and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, first of all, this country's stolen land. You know what I mean? So I don't know, being a patriot is kind of a weird thing. And I don't know, just the whole, it just weirds me out. It always has. Like, I'm here to speak my truth, and I don't care who's going to listen to me. And I try to be friends with everybody in this community. But I feel like I've had to put up with a really weird amount of just like Christian ideals being shoved down my throat, and sometimes by people who aren't even Christian and don't even realize they're doing it. Like, the programming goes really deep, and like I said, it's like the two groups are pointing at each other. Like, you're programmed to believe that we're wrong, and you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, I just think that there's got to be something there. Like, why would they build Christian Catholic boarding schools and then literally systematically brainwash all of the natives? And we're finding graves. Okay. And not only that, we know the rich, all the rape that's happening at these institutions and stuff like that of children. It's being presented to the public eye like a coincidence, and like, okay, like the priests can't have normal sex and they freak out and they fuck kids. Oh, oops. No, that's not what it is. It's a cornerstone of the religion. It's a cornerstone of the Luciferian aspect of the religion that's hidden under the cloth. They have rituals that are like written in stone, how they do them, where they kill kids and stuff. And that's a huge part of it. That's like a huge part of this is like to my viewers who maybe are religious, like, I'm not telling you have to believe in everything and be the same as me, but you need to understand, everyone needs to understand that the Luciferian order has infiltrated all of the world's major religions. Like, they've got, it's like the same thing where you see like, there's this guy who was a head of the world child sex trafficking organization where they supposedly protect kids, and he got caught trying to solicit sex through a mom and dad where he wanted to like touch a baby. Like, this man's disgusting, right? Mm-hmm. And this guy was the head of the world, the sex trafficking protection agency or whatever. I wish I could remember names. Even when I try to Google it, it's hard to find it, but I know the story is real. And this is extremely common. They have the phrase "a wolf in sheep's clothing" for a reason. It's because it's a cultural phenomenon and you see all over the place. And I just think that like I said, we don't all have to see completely eye to things, but we do need to understand that regardless of whatever religion you participate in or whatever your beliefs are, there is this Luciferian order on earth. They are extremely evil. They worship power. They do extremely fucked up stuff, and they're the enemy. It doesn't matter who you are. And to me, it's like, no matter what our differences are, like, okay, you think, you disagree with me on trans people or whatever. That doesn't matter as much as, are you on the same page about this cult? We need to get rid of this cult. Like, we need to get rid of these evil people. And I just think we just need to just realize that, having a common enemy makes us friends, and that, we just need to start respecting each other's different beliefs more, but also like realizing that we can build a better world together, and we can break free from this order. Because I mean, the whole idea of their whole model is they don't want you to be able to see them, right? They don't want you to be able to see that they exist, because light is this infectious thing where, like, you turn on one light in a little room, you're going to be able to see, you know what I mean? And they know that light just spreads. It just spreads. It's like, it's not like darkness where it needs to continue eating and eating and eating. It just spreads. So in order to keep their shit going, they have to be like cockroaches and hide in the dark. And what we have now is a situation where we're stomping on the floor and trying to get the cockroaches to crawl on out so we can stomp on their little heads. That's what we're doing right now.
Yes, exactly right.
And it's like, we don't all need to be on the same page. I know I'm like really reiterating that, but I'm obviously going to speak my beliefs on this channel, like, and I don't want to polarize myself and make it so certain people don't want to listen to my message, because you don't have to agree with everything I have to say. But like I said, we do need to recognize that we all deserve sovereignty and freedom, and we deserve a planet with clean air, clean water. We deserve a healthy planet. These are things that no one's arguing over. Nobody's like, you know what? Actually, we can fuck up the earth for capitalism. It's totally okay. Nobody's saying that. Like, everybody agrees we need to do something and fast, because this planet's like dying. So we just need to get on the same page about the big, really important issues and stop arguing over the small, contrived issues that are manufactured to keep us distracted.
Oh, and before I forget, I wanted to also mention something. I think you had posted something on Facebook regarding timelines and dimensions. And
yes.
okay, so this is really a weird thing. My oldest daughter, she was born with the cord around her neck. So she was born, I think when she was born, her Apgar score was 0, 1, 2. So exactly at birth, they give everything a score: breathing, skin, heart rate, whatever, up to 10. So 0, she wasn't even breathing. They had no heartbeat, no nothing. She was born completely, utterly dead. At 1 minute, they were able to get a faint heartbeat. And at 10 minutes, her score went to 2 because she was kind of breathing and they had a heartbeat. That was it. She was still gray at that moment. She was a very quiet child. She didn't speak. She didn't speak until she was 3, maybe 4. Because it was like 97. So she didn't speak, but when she did, it was like she was storing every word that she heard until she could have an utter conversation. And she just, one day, my dad took her to the store because he goes, you know, she was the quietest one and I could take her shopping with me and we could have fun. But he said she just got in the car and grandpa, blah, 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 the whole way there, the whole way back. And when she was about headed into preschool, she was telling me things like, I see lights around people. I said, what do you mean lights? She's like, I see lights, like colors, like somebody colors around them. And she's like, and I can tell you what your colors are, and I can tell you what that person's color is. And she could see auras. And then things started to get kind of scary for her, because then she started to see what she considers to be dead people. So she was seeing people that she thought were dead. Because she was seeing this man that was in a wheelchair going down in front of the house one day, and she's like, asked her brother, she's like, do you see that guy in the wheelchair? And her brother's like, no. And they were talking about it, and she's like, come to me. She was really upset. She's, Mama couldn't see him, or I could see him, but my brother couldn't see him. So I started asking her all kinds of questions, realized that she was really, really different, but in a good way. And she was put into Head Start, and she went into the Rainbow Room. And all of the kids went into different colored rooms, but she went into the Rainbow Room. And I've actually had somebody
that sounds familiar. The Rainbow Room. I've never heard anyone talk about that before.
The Rainbow Room.
Something tells me that that I've had a similar experience.
I remember because I had to do the Roy G. Biv, the rainbow, had to do the colors. I had to have it perfect. Otherwise it would make me stay awake at night because I had to. So I believe I was in that same scenario. My one son was in the Blue Room, but he's a medium. He can pull in other people and talk to them. Another son was in the Yellow Room, which the only thing that I know about the Yellow Room is that those kids went into the military. But anyway, back to the story. So my daughter sees, I talked to a medicine man because I was worried about her, because she would get very suicidal, and she would drink a lot because she's like, I would be talking to her and she would see something at the window and there would be a person standing there. I'd run out to go and jump on this person, and there was nobody out there. So this was going on for many, many years. She could describe people, everything. Well, it turns out she wasn't a medium. She wasn't seeing dead people. She can see different dimensions. She was born, she is a dual citizen, as she was born with 1 foot in this world and 1 foot in a different dimension. So she's able to move through these dimensions very easily without any type of technology, without any type of portal, without anything. And she's like, talks to me about it, but she, I mean, I couldn't ever get her to come and talk to you because, she's very like a lot of people, Native people, are very quiet about things like this because they don't want people to think that they're crazy. And I was like, so tell me what kind of dreams you have. That's always my opening with people. I want to know, what kind of dream do you have? And she's like, I go to the different worlds and I go to these different dimensions. I go, how do you get there? I don't know. She's like, I just get there. And she says that they're funny sometimes. She's like, sometimes it's like people are made different, or things are backwards, or this has a bunch of suns, or just, different things all over, the different animals and colors. The trees are not green, they're red, things like that. And there are people out there like that, and I believe her. I believe her 100%. Because I've had somebody that's in the program talk to me. They saw a picture of my daughter because I just felt compelled to show her picture to a group of people and ask anybody, do you know this woman? And she turns out that one of her clones works on a ship off planet, and she's got a totally different name, but it's exactly the same person. And a lot of these people that can do all these strange and wonderful things are utilized by these programs because they can do that. Now, I have a weird thing with time because I know time is not real. I've been able to bend it in this spectrum on this planet.
I've done it too. Yeah. Like, can you make the clock go faster?
I'm able to stop. No, I'm able to stop it. I'm able to make time go faster, but the time on the clock remains the same.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It started with just doing a parlor trick of trying to make it through the intersection before the light turned red. And I realized after a while that I wasn't holding that color. I was stopping like the time from when it would turn from yellow to red, that I was able to make it through the intersection. So that's kind of how that started.
I remember being in school when I was a kid, and I would sit at the clock and I would make the hand move faster because I wanted to go home. And you could literally hear people's voices speed up. And I remember that there was a teacher at my high school, was a handler. And I remember when I told him about this, I remember his reaction to it. He was concerned. And I believe that I do have those kind of abilities too in the programs where I'm able to maybe switch to other realities. Just, I've been told that I can, from other people, that I can open portals. They've seen me open portals and walk through them without any technology. So I think there's truth to that. And the whole thing with the last interview that I did that I ended up not putting up was somebody was trying to say that there aren't alternate realities. And I didn't mean to disrespect this person. There's somebody that I respect a lot, but I disagree with them on that. And I couldn't put up the show, and now we don't get along because of it, because they felt like I wasted their time. But I don't want to confuse my guests. Like, from what I've seen, there are alternate realities, big time, and we're interacting with them, and they know about each other. So it's a huge part of these programs. Like one thing that they'll do is they'll do swaps. I think they call them, for whatever reason, bubble swaps. I can't remember why they call it that, but they call it a bubble swap. And what they'll do is they'll take a you from one timeline and swap it with a you from another timeline and put you into service. And that way, when you get put back, the realities are different enough to where when you're talking publicly, it doesn't affect the reality you're in, because you were in another reality. You're not compromising any information or anything like that, because who knows what fucking reality you're talking about. And there's like SSP type people that watch our videos to try to find information, and they understand this now. So it's like our videos are harder to, now that they've been doing the swap stuff more, it's harder for them to like understand where the intel is coming from and what we're talking about, and like what's real and what is existing where, and stuff like that. It's like and another thing that's true too is, like, by us talking publicly, it affects our lives, the lives of our alters and stuff like that. Like, it affects it affects things more than I think a lot of us realize. Like, people get reprimanded for talking publicly about things. Like, if you work for Mars Defense Force and you talk about certain things, you will get reprimanded. Like, in your cover here now altar, even though you're not related at all, you can get reprimanded for it. It's happened to me, and it's happened to other people too. It also can happen with Nakwafen. You can get reprimanded for your cover altar talking, and they look at it as your altar's responsibility to keep your cover altar in check and complacent and not realizing things. So
well,
I don't know.
Instead of going out and finding all the 120 some, because there are some people that have 100,000 of altars, instead of going there, it's easier to just go back to the person and be like, doesn't matter who said it. You're just, the one person gets picked out.
According to Stuart Swerdlow, who was a Montauk programmer, we all have a 32 by 32 array cubed of altars, and we all have the same number of altars, and it's like something 3,000 something. That's what Stuart Swerdlow says. I don't know, how true that is or not, but regardless of whether that's true or not, most of us have a lot of altars. And it's also important to mention too that people kind of think that we're always super soldiers fighting space battles, and I've got altars that are janitors, construction workers, miners, stuff like that. In fact, it's interesting. I have an altar named Marshall James Howard, and your name's Eve Howard. So I thought that was interesting. I wonder almost if we have maybe, like, if that last name was pulled from my genome, like it's in there somewhere, and maybe we have some sort of distant relation. Because I think I might have, I really need to do a DNA test, because I think I have native DNA in me. I don't know what your background is, if you're pure native or what.
By the government, I'm 4164th Native American. But I think if you add my mother's blood in, I am supposed to be like 7/8 Native American. So I'm enrolled. So to be enrolled, you have to be over a quarter Native American blood, and it has to be in a single band. So they use the White Earth Band blood for my enrollment, but I'm also from Red Lake too. So, and my mother was from Ontario. So they have all French names: Imogen, Genevieve, Jean Marcel, and Jean Baptiste. So, or Joseph Marcel and Jean Baptiste. They all have French names. But yeah, they came from Ontario, from Thunder Bay, Ontario, came down south, and then they stayed there at the Turtle Island, which is kind of like Superior, Duluth, Michigan area, and then came down into northern Minnesota. So, but my father was there was some blood, he called it French, but I think after I discovered it, it was French Creole, so like Haitian. And actually found out somebody that's in the program, I discovered, they found me. I was discussing something in a post, and contacted me, and I found my half brother. So I have a half brother that's in the program. He's already been out public and everything for many years.
I've had a similar thing happen to me where I found a sister, but we haven't figured out that they're literally my sister. But I mean, they look like me except a girl. It's kind of crazy. But
yeah, he looks like me. In fact, I showed his picture to my daughter, the one that I was just telling you about, and she slapped the phone out of my hand and was like, "Don't show me that again, because that freaked me out. You guys look way too alike." And she just was like, "Ugh." And didn't want to talk about it anymore.
Is there anything you want to talk about before we wrap things up here?
No, I think we went over a lot of things that I had wanted to touch base on. And my hopes in this is that if I were to step forward in hopes that others would do so as well, because there needs to be a point where people have to accept the truth as the truth is, and from that moment on, healing can begin. And we all need that. There are so many of us that are hurting, and I can feel it. And most of the nights, almost like I just send out like these feelings of love, regardless. Even if you've hurt me and called me names or whatever, done something to make me cry, I'll still send you love. You know, I mean, because we need it as humans, as Terrans of this planet, we need love. And then doing so that we can take care of our mother, our planet, and so that she can keep loving us for a very, very long time.
There is some truth to the love and light aspect of like the truther movement. You know, like we do have to try to live more positively and live at a higher vibration, but also we do need to understand that we have to be warriors. You know, we have to be able to defend our honor and defend our way of life and our sovereignty. And that's hugely important, is walking that tightrope of being ready to defend yourself and keeping your people, keeping, you know, the planet Earth, even, you know, and if you're going to look at the whole picture, safe. It's you know, it's like love and light is a huge aspect of it. We need to be more loving, more understanding, but also, you know, the world has darkness, and we need to be able to face it in an appropriate manner and deal with it and vanquish it when the opportunity presents itself.
Exactly. There's just no way for us to be able to get rid of the parasites that are living on this planet until we actually acknowledge them and acknowledge the mistruths and all the misdeeds that have been done for eons here. And from there comes growth and spirituality and not living in shame and guilt and fear anymore, but in like love and happiness and acceptance and no judgment. You know, just to be living in a world like that where you're just accepted because you are. And that's exactly what this place needs. That's exactly what this planet needs.
I think this was a really, really great interview. I honestly can't thank you enough. I feel like this was, as far as interviewing, this was maybe the best. You were the best subject that I maybe ever had. Just in the fact that you presented so much new and important information. It's not something that's being reiterated a million times by a million different people. Your information is really unique and really important. And I hope that more Indigenous folks that are in these programs become whistleblowers and blow the lid off of how it's connected to how they've been treated and how we can heal. And yeah, I think you're doing great work. You obviously care about, you know, your people a lot. And we just have to keep putting in the work, putting in the effort, and believing that a better world can be possible. And we'll get there one step at a time. I really think that we're heading towards a more positive timeline. I really hope so. And I'm hoping eventually we can get to the point where we have, you know, in a court of law, a situation where these tribes get their land back, and we can have a situation where we heal, where we have treatment facilities for both drug and alcohol use at a base level, and then also for DID and PTSD and other mental illnesses caused by these programs. And yeah, I just think that we really can make this, it's possible to create a better world and treat this issue and roll it out in a way where we can clinically treat the illness that the earth has right now. We can do like we're doctors treating an illness. You know what I mean? That's what we have to do. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. And yeah, I'd love to do another interview with you again sometime in the future where we can cover some more ground and maybe talk about some other things.
Okay, I think that's great. I think that's a great idea. I'd love to be on the show again.
So this is Fractal Weapons. Thanks for listening, everybody. And this was our guest was Eve Howard. If people want to get a hold of you, is there a way they can do that? Or are you kind of trying to be more of a private person, or?
No, I actually have an SSP Facebook that it's public. It's Eve Howard. You can find me pretty much. I'm in the community a lot. I do have. I'm also a healer, but I haven't quite gotten. I had to redo my whole website, so I'm still in the process of figuring that out yet. But other than that, you can just reach me on Facebook and through Messenger. And I think I do have like Telegraph, Signal, Discord, all of that, but I'm hardly ever on it. So.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again, Eve. Such an excellent conversation. It was an honor to have you on the show. And yeah, thanks for everybody for listening. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay, good. Yeah,